Claire drove home late that evening, the weight of another long day pressing on her shoulders. Her eyes were tired from staring at screens, her head heavy from endless meetings, but still she forced herself to keep going. She pulled into the driveway and sat for a moment in the quiet of her car, letting out a slow breath before stepping out. The sound of laughter drifted from inside the house. Through the window, she could see the warm glow of the living room lights. Her mother was on the phone, smiling brightly, her voice filled with pride as she spoke to someone. "Yes, Daniel's promotion is just the start. He's going to go so far. I'm so proud of him." The words stung a little, not because Claire envied her brother, but because she couldn't remember the last time her mother had spoken about her with such joy. Claire unlocked the door and walked in quietly. Her siblings were sprawled across the couch, sharing jokes, their laughter filling the room. Nobody looked up. Nobody noticed her. She stood for a moment in the hallway, the sound of her heels soft against the floor, waiting for someone to acknowledge her. Finally, she said softly, "I'm home." The air shifted. Naomi rolled her eyes, Daniel smirked, and their mother barely glanced at her before turning back to her phone conversation. "Oh, Claire's here," Ruth said dismissively, waving her hand as if to brush her aside. Dinner that night felt the same as always. Ruth fussed over Daniel, asking about his future plans, while Naomi boasted about a new dress she wanted. Claire listened in silence, pushing her food around her plate. She tried to add to the conversation, but her words always seemed to hang awkwardly in the air, ignored or brushed away. Then Daniel leaned back in his chair, a cruel smile tugging at his lips. "You know, Claire," he said loudly, "if you ever lost that job of yours, you'd be nothing. Just nothing." The room burst into laughter. Naomi giggled, Ruth shook her head with a smirk, and Daniel basked in their approval. The sound echoed in Claire's ears, sharp and cutting. She forced a faint smile, trying to hide the sting, but her eyes burned. No one saw it. No one cared. That night, long after the laughter had faded and the house had gone quiet, Claire lay awake in her room. She stared at the ceiling, her chest tight with a mix of anger and sadness. She thought about everything she had done for them. The bills she quietly paid, the sacrifices she made, the way she carried responsibilities no one else would. And still they saw her as nothing. Her brother's words repeated in her head. "If you ever lost that job, you'd be nothing." Slowly, a thought formed in her mind, sharp and daring. What if she let them believe it? What if she gave them exactly what they mocked her for? She sat up, a strange calmness settling over her. She would test them. She would see how they treated her without the one thing they believed gave her value. Tomorrow, she decided, she would tell them she had lost her job. Independent, hardworking, but emotionally neglected by her family. This was the truth of Claire's life. At 32, she had built herself into a strong and capable woman, someone who never gave up no matter how heavy the load became. On the outside, she carried herself with quiet grace, her co-workers respecting her for her calm, steady nature. In the office, people turned to her for advice, for guidance, for reassurance. She was admired for her discipline, her intelligence, and her kindness. But the moment she walked through the front door of her own home, that respect vanished. Inside those walls, she was not the admired professional. She was just Claire, the spare, the forgotten daughter. The one who never seemed to shine as brightly as her brother or bring the charm of her younger sister. Her achievements went unnoticed. Her sacrifices unspoken. What no one in the family truly knew, or wanted to know, was how much she carried for them. Every month, Claire quietly paid the rent to keep the roof over their heads. She covered her mother's hospital bills, never mentioning the extra hours she worked just to make sure Ruth had the care she needed. Daniel, the so-called golden child, had his college tuition covered by her hard-earned money. When he dropped out, she said nothing, swallowing her disappointment and paying off the remaining debt anyway. Naomi, her younger sister, often came to her with excuses and little sighs about needing just a bit of money for clothes or outings. Claire gave it, knowing she would never hear the words thank you in return. Her mother, Ruth, at 58, had grown bitter with life. She poured her affection into Daniel, praising him at every opportunity, even when he did nothing to deserve it. Ruth never hid her preference. "My son will go far," she would say proudly, as though he was already a man of great success, even while he spent most of his days lounging and scrolling through his phone. To Claire, Ruth gave only criticism, The kind that stung because it came from a place where love should have been. Daniel, 28, was arrogant despite having little to show for it. He lived on Claire's money without shame, still convinced the world owed him something greater. His pride was loud, his laughter often mocking, and his words always sharp when aimed at his sister. Naomi, at 24, was a mirror of their mother's favoritism and Daniel's entitlement. She wanted the good life without the work, craving luxuries she couldn't afford. She relied on Claire for spending money, never questioning where it came from, never wondering what it cost her sister to provide it. The contrast between Claire's two worlds was painful. At work, she was a leader, a woman people looked up to. At home, she was invisible. Her voice was ignored, her presence treated like a burden. The same family she quietly held together with her sacrifices saw her as ordinary, even less than ordinary. Deep inside, Claire was tired. Tired of giving, tired of proving her worth, tired of hoping for affection that never came. She wanted love without conditions, acceptance without question. But with her family, everything was a test, and she always seemed to fail in their eyes. Sometimes, late at night, memories of her childhood returned uninvited. She remembered one moment in particular, one that had etched itself deep into her heart. She had been no more than 12 years old, her small hands clutching a few crumpled bills she had saved from allowance. Her mother had been sick, coughing and weak, and Claire had gone to the pharmacy alone to buy her medicine. She returned home proud of herself, proud that she could help in some way. She placed the medicine in her mother's hands, waiting for a smile for praise. But Ruth only frowned and said, "You should have done better. You could have found a cheaper option. This isn't enough." The words had cut her then, leaving a wound that never fully healed. From that day forward, she had worked harder, given more, hoping one day she would be enough for her family. But no matter how much she offered, no matter how much she sacrificed, the approval never came. Now, years later, those old wounds still lived inside her. They resurfaced every time her mother praised Daniel for something he hadn't done, or when Naomi rolled her eyes at her. They burned every time she heard laughter at her expense, every time she was reminded that, to them, she was only valuable because of what she provided, not because of who she was. Claire carried all of this quietly, almost invisibly, as though her silence would earn her love. But in truth, that silence only allowed her family to keep taking without pause, without guilt. And deep within her, a question began to rise, one she had been afraid to face. What would happen if she stopped giving? "I was laid off today." The words left Claire's lips quietly, but they seemed to fill the whole room. She had rehearsed them in her head all morning, but saying them aloud still made her chest feel heavy. Her family froze for a moment. Ruth slowly set down her teacup. Daniel's eyebrows shot up, and Naomi's mouth opened in shock. For a heartbeat, Claire hoped they would ask if she was okay, if she needed a hug, if she was worried about what came next. But the silence broke with her mother's sharp voice. "So, who will pay the bills now? Daniel? Naomi? Definitely not me." She let out a bitter laugh, shaking her head as though the situation was ridiculous. Claire blinked. "No, are you all right? No, don't worry, we'll get through this. Just panic about money." Daniel leaned back in his chair, crossing his arms. "Well, I guess you'll finally see how useless you are without a paycheck." His lips curled into a cruel smirk. "All that hard work, and it took one pink slip to prove what I've been saying all along." Naomi groaned dramatically, pushing her plate away. "Great. Just great. Now what? I was counting on you helping me with the deposit for my apartment." She rolled her eyes, muttering, "This is so selfish of you." Claire sat quietly, her hands folded in her lap. The sting of their words cut deep, but she didn't flinch. She watched them, really watched them, as if seeing them clearly for the first time. Her mother's fear of losing comfort, her brother's arrogance, her sister's whining, all of it, laid bare. Instead of offering comfort, they started blaming her. Ruth sighed loudly, shaking her head. "You should have chosen a better career. Something stable. Honestly, Claire, how could you let this happen? You always make such poor choices." Daniel chuckled. "She probably messed up and got herself fired." "Don't act surprised, Mom. Claire's never been the smart one in this family." Naomi added her own sharp words. "I knew this day would come. You were too proud about your job, always acting like you were better than us. Well, look at you now. You're just like everyone else, maybe worse." Their voices rose, a chorus of blame and disappointment, while Claire sat there silent. Inside, she felt a storm building, a mix of pain, betrayal, and something else. Something colder. She had given them everything for years, and this was their reaction. Not one of them asked if she was okay, if she was scared, if she needed support. All they saw was the loss of money, the loss of convenience. Ruth stood up, pacing the room. "We can't survive without your salary, Claire. What were you thinking? You should have been more careful, more grateful. Now we're all going to suffer because of you." Claire lowered her gaze, hiding the small, bitter smile forming at the corner of her mouth. "This is it," she thought. "This is who they are when I have nothing to give them." The conversation dragged on, each sibling tossing blame at her. Daniel bragged about how he wouldn't let a job loss happen to him, though he didn't even have a job to lose. Naomi complained that her plans were ruined. Ruth muttered about bills, about sacrifices, as though she were the one carrying the family. Through it all, Claire said nothing more. She didn't defend herself. She didn't argue. She just nodded softly, her face calm, her heart heavy. Every word they spoke was another knife, but instead of breaking her, it sharpened something inside her. That night, when the house grew quiet, Claire sat alone in her room. Their cruel words still echoed in her mind. Useless. Selfish. Poor choices. She wrapped her arms around herself, staring into the dark. For years, she had believed that love meant sacrifice, that if she gave enough they would see her value. But tonight proved the truth. Without her paycheck they didn't see her at all. She closed her eyes, letting out a shaky breath. The test had begun, and already the results were clear. Bills pile up. Claire doesn't pay. For the first time in years, the rent goes unpaid. The electricity bill arrives with a red notice. The water company sends a warning letter. The small comforts her family never thought twice about begin to disappear. At first, they assume Claire is simply late. Ruth scolds her mildly, telling her to be more responsible. But as the days turn into weeks and no payments are made, the family turns against her. Naomi is the first to snap. "You're a burden, Claire," she hisses one afternoon when the internet is cut off. "We've carried you long enough. If you can't even keep the lights on, what good are you?" Claire sits at the table quietly, her hands wrapped around a cold mug of coffee. She doesn't answer. She lets Naomi's anger hang in the air, her silence both heavy and sharp. Ruth shakes her head, her voice rising with frustration. "This is exactly what happens when you choose the wrong career. You should have been smarter. Look at Daniel." Daniel interrupts with a smug laugh. "Yeah, Mom, look at me. I wouldn't let something like this happen. She just doesn't have what it takes." Claire listens. Every word cuts, but she doesn't defend herself. She stays calm, her face unreadable, her eyes watchful. At night, when she is alone, she takes out her phone and plays back the recordings. Whispers she captured when they thought she wasn't listening, cruel laughter, insults muttered under their breath. She gathers them quietly, piece by piece, her silence now an armor. One evening, her phone buzzes. It's Marcus, a close friend from work, one of the few people who truly knows her. He steps inside, his eyes full of concern. "You okay?" he asks softly. Claire forces a faint smile. "I'm fine." But Marcus sees the tired lines on her face, the weight in her shoulders. He knows the truth, that she hasn't lost her job at all. "This is her test. You need to be careful," he warns gently. "Some betrayals, you can't come back from them." Claire nods. "I know." Her voice is calm, but inside her chest something aches. Meanwhile, Ruth begins calling relatives. On the phone, her voice turns pitiful, dramatic. "Claire has ruined us," she says loudly, making sure Claire can hear from the hallway. "She lost her job and now refuses to take responsibility. I don't know what will happen to us." The relatives murmur sympathy, but Ruth's tone is sharp, painting Claire as careless, selfish, even lazy. Each lie is another twist of the knife, yet Claire listens without interruption. Daniel grows bolder. "If you can't contribute, maybe you should move out," he says one night, leaning across the table with a smirk. "Why should we keep you here if you're just dead weight?" Naomi nods in agreement. "Yeah. You've done enough damage already. Maybe you should go." Claire sits perfectly still, her eyes lowered. She feels the sting of their rejection, the coldness of being cast aside by the very people she has carried for years. But she says nothing. She lets their words wash over her, silent but burning. That night, when the house is quiet, Claire breaks down. She sits on the edge of her bed, her face buried in her hands, her shoulders shaking with silent sobs. The tears come fast, years of pain spilling out in the safety of her empty room. She thinks of all the nights she stayed up late working extra hours to cover Daniel's tuition. All the mornings she went without so Naomi could have what she wanted. All the sacrifices no one ever saw. Her chest aches with the question, why wasn't it enough? Why was I never enough? But when the tears slow, another feeling begins to rise. Cold, clear, steady. This is the truth she needed to see. Their cruelty, their selfishness, their lack of love. It is all out in the open now. They have shown her exactly who they are when she has nothing to give. She wipes her face, her breathing steadying. She looks into the mirror and whispers to herself, now I know. And in that moment, though her heart is broken, she feels a strange kind of strength. One night, Ruth gathered everyone in the living room. Her arms were crossed, her face set with cold determination. We can't go on like this anymore, she declared. Starting tomorrow, we're changing the locks. Claire, you'll have to find somewhere else to live. Daniel grinned from the couch, clapping his hands together. Finally. About time we got rid of her dead weight. Naomi barely looked up from her phone, only shrugging. Yeah, makes sense. She's not helping anyway. Claire stood near the doorway, her hands trembling at her sides. For a long moment, she didn't move, didn't speak. Silent tears welled in her eyes and slipped down her cheeks. They had no idea what she had done for them, no idea how much of their comfort came from her sacrifices. Finally, she raised her head. Her voice shook at first, but grew stronger with every word. Do you know who has been paying this rent? Who covered Naomi's tuition? Who kept the lights on when you were in debt? The room fell silent. Daniel's grin faded. Ruth frowned, confused. Naomi blinked, lowering her phone. Claire reached into her bag and pulled out a thick folder. She laid it on the table and opened it, spreading out receipts, bank statements, and bills. Me, she said firmly. It was me. All these years, it was me. Every rent payment, every hospital bill, every debt you couldn't handle, I paid it. And I never asked for thanks. I only wanted to be part of this family. Their faces drained of color as they stared at the papers. Daniel leaned forward, flipping through the receipts with shaking hands. His voice cracked. This can't be real. It's real, Claire said, her eyes burning now, not with tears but with strength. While you sat here mocking me, laughing at me, calling me useless, I was the one keeping this house standing. Without me, you would have lost everything years ago. Naomi's lips parted, her voice faint. You paid my tuition? Claire turned her gaze on her sister. Every cent. And you never once said thank you. Not once. Ruth tried to recover, her voice sharp. That doesn't matter. You should have told us. You should have shared. Claire cut her off. Shared? I gave everything I had, Mom. And still it was never enough for you. Never. The silence that followed was heavy, filled with shock and guilt. For the first time, her family looked small in front of her. Then came the final twist. The front door opened, and Marcus stepped inside. He wasn't in casual clothes this time but in a sharp suit, carrying a briefcase. Claire turned to him with a nod, her expression steady. Marcus looked at the family, then spoke clearly. My name is Marcus Hayes. I'm Claire's lawyer. I think there's something you all need to know. Ruth blinked, confused. Lawyer? For what? Marcus set the briefcase down and opened it, pulling out documents. For this house. You see, Claire bought it months ago. The deed is in her name. Legally, she's the owner. The room exploded. Daniel shot to his feet. That's impossible. This is our house. We've lived here all our lives. Marcus shook his head calmly. Not anymore. You've been tenants without knowing it. And now legally, Claire has the right to decide who stays and who goes. Naomi gasped, her face pale. You mean she can kick us out? Marcus's voice was steady. Yes, and she would be completely within her rights. All three of them turned to Claire then, their eyes wide with disbelief, fear, and the sudden realization of just how wrong they had been. Claire stood tall, her tears gone now. Her voice was quiet, but it carried power. I tested you. I wanted to see how you would treat me if I had nothing. And now I know. You mocked me. You pushed me aside. You tried to throw me out. But the truth is, this house stands because of me. And now, you are the ones who can be thrown out. The color drained from Ruth's face. Daniel's fists clenched, his arrogance shattered. Naomi looked down at her phone ashamed. For the first time, Claire wasn't the one shrinking in the corner. She was the one standing in the center, the truth on her side, and the power finally in her hands. I wanted to see how you'd treat me if I had nothing. Now I know. Claire's voice was calm, steady, but it cut through the room like a blade. Her family sat frozen, still stunned by Marcus's revelation. She looked at each of them in turn, her eyes clear. You'll never have another chance to use me again. The words hung in the air, sharp and final. She closed the folder of receipts and pushed it toward them. Everything you needed to know is right there. Every bill, every payment, every sacrifice. And still you mocked me, laughed at me, tried to throw me out of the home I bought. Ruth's face crumpled. Tears welled in her eyes and her voice shook. Claire, you don't mean this. I'm your mother. I made mistakes, but families fight. They hurt each other. Claire shook her head firmly. No. Families don't do what you did. Families don't measure love in money. Families don't throw their own away. Daniel stepped forward, his voice suddenly desperate. Claire, come on. You don't have to do this. We were just upset. I was joking when I called you useless. You know I didn't mean it. Claire met his eyes unblinking. You meant every word. And even if you didn't, the way you treated me showed exactly what I mean to you. Nothing. Naomi, still clutching her phone, let out a bitter laugh. You think you're better than us now? Fine. Keep your stupid house. You'll regret this when you're old and alone. But Claire didn't flinch. For the first time in years, she felt steady-rooted. I'd rather be alone than used, she said quietly. The silence that followed was heavy. Ruth sobbed into her hands. Daniel's face twisted with shame and anger. Naomi muttered curses under her breath. But Claire didn't bend. She stood tall, her back straight, her voice calm. This house is mine, she said. And tonight, I'm asking you to leave. Her mother cried harder. Daniel begged again. Naomi stomped off to her room to slam the door. But Claire did not change her mind. She didn't scream, she didn't argue. She simply repeated the truth. It's over. I'm free. Marcus placed a hand gently on her shoulder. I'll help you handle the paperwork, he said softly. They can't fight this. You've done more than enough. That night, the house echoed with chaos. Pleading, shouting, crying. But Claire moved through it all with quiet strength. She packed their things into boxes with Marcus's help, setting them by the door. For once, she wasn't the one left standing in the shadows. By morning, the house was hers alone. The silence was strange at first, but not painful. It was peaceful. She walked through each room slowly, touching the walls, breathing deeply. For the first time, this space truly belonged to her. Not as a burden, not as a sacrifice, but as a home. Her phone buzzed constantly with missed calls and angry messages. She turned it over and pressed block. The screen went silent. Marcus smiled at her gently. How do you feel? Claire looked around the quiet house, then back at him. Her lips curved into a small, genuine smile. Free. And with that single word, she stepped into the new chapter of her life, peaceful, independent, unburdened at last. Claire walked alone at sunrise, coffee in hand, her face peaceful. The air was cool, and the city was just waking up. She felt light, almost weightless, as if all the heaviness of the past years had finally lifted. Her thoughts spoke softly, like a voice inside her chest. Sometimes losing everything is the only way to see the truth. But I didn't lose anything. I gained myself. She stopped for a moment at a quiet corner, watching the sunlight stretch across the street. Her phone buzzed in her pocket. Messages from the same family who once laughed, insulted, and pushed her away. She looked at the screen, her expression calm. Then she pressed block on each of their numbers. The screen went blank. Silence filled her phone. For the first time, it didn't scare her. It didn't hurt. It felt like freedom. Claire took another sip of her coffee, warm and steady. She smiled. Not the polite smile she had worn for years to keep peace. Not the tired smile of someone begging for love. This smile was different. It was real. It was hers. And for the first time, Claire smiled not for anyone else, but only for herself. Hey friends, thanks for sticking with me till the end. Sparkling heart, don't forget to like, drop a comment, and hit that subscribe button for more stories. See you in the next one. Bye.